hear this popping sound, and all of a sudden this SUV is coming at me with his arms just firing away. Rochelle, they rolled right by me. Said, I think we were just shot at. They came back around and started shooting again. This is where I knew I had PTSD from this. I was laying in the bed that night, and all of a sudden there's a barrel of a gun facing from the TV at me, and I jumped out of bed and landed in the floor. I wasn't even thinking. I have a couple of police officers that are friends. I couldn't even look at their gun. I started learning that it's not selfish to feel like I'm important, and so are your feelings. I started believing that I am worthy of a happy life, a content life.
Hey, Lynn, thanks so much for being here today. I'm so excited to have this conversation. Well, first of all, where were you? I know you're in Virginia Beach, but where were you like emotionally that had you seeking out help before you did come to work with us?
Well, I've done counseling in the past for various situations that came up. And so I was sitting thinking, okay, maybe so many things have happened. A lot of deaths in my family. I've got two family members right now recently diagnosed with cancer. And being a nurse, I'm kind of in the middle of all of that. And so it's been a very rocky road for the past, I'd say 5-6 years. And so I thought I just came to a conclusion one day. I just sat down and I said, I can't keep going like this because, as a nurse and a female, we don't like to say no. And so we think we're going to save the world, but we don't. So I saw you actually on Facebook and I heard you talk, and then there was a link or something. I can't remember all the details now, but I ended up talking with Megan on the phone.
Yes.
And she just took me through, every point she hit was exactly what I was thinking and feeling. So I knew this was a God thing. So as she's talking to me and I'm relaying a lot of my past, much more in depth than what I just did with you, then she was able to take the conversation and turn it from kind of like victimhood, I guess you could say. And then she almost made it sound like, okay, Lynn, that's where you were. Now, what can we do about all of this to get you sleeping, to get you feeling better, more energized, to get you to the point where you don't react so much, but you're more intentional with your reactions to different situations. And I thought, boy, she's speaking my brain right now. So then we got into the money. And I thought, oh my gosh, I just bought a house and all this kind of stuff. And as I kept talking with her, and she didn't force anything. She just kept talking to me and I was talking back, and then all of a sudden I just said, you know what, let's just do it. I'll figure out the money. And so I did figure out the money. That got me to the point where I am now, finishing the program, and so happy that I did it. It's just this stuff you can take to your grave. You can keep working these points and tools that you all provide for the rest of your life. And it's good reminders whenever I feel that angst coming up again. I go, I'm not a victim. I'm a conqueror. How are we going to work this problem now? And then I start going through, made a lot of notes when I was listening to the modules and so forth too.
Oh, I love that. Well, congratulations for showing up with consistency and for taking the brave action, because it is true when you're sitting in that seat. I want to go back to the place you said, I knew I had to do something, but still it takes courage. Like you're saying, there's still hesitancy even though you want the relief. But you mentioned not sleeping, and you said angst and the place where you felt like you couldn't go on. What were you experiencing? What was a day like, or what were the symptoms that you were having that made you say, I don't want to go on like this?
Just I was sleeping maybe 2 hours a night, and I would wake up in the middle of the night and go, where's the party? I was wide awake and wired and ready to go. I'm 73 years old. I'm not that wired during the day, and here I am at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like all over the place. I get into this loop in my head, and it doesn't hit me until it's time to go to sleep. So I consider that as a challenge that, you know what, I'm not going to let this get to me. So then as I went through the program, I was able to learn the tools, the 15-minute mornings I did at night, or maybe during the day. And I learned to meditate through the modules and all, but I was just I knew I was up against a wall, but I didn't know how to climb over it or go around it or go through it. Didn't know which way to turn to get out of that same loop thinking of, oh, woe is me, my gosh, look at all my problems. Let's find an answer.
And I love that you just were open. Like sometimes people feel like they get to a certain stage in life and they're just going to do the same thing they've always been doing. I love that you were open to that, thinking just because it's always been like this or it has been like this, I can do something different. What would you say now are some of the biggest wins that you've had in terms of how you feel now as opposed to how you felt in the beginning?
Well, one of the biggest ones, I'm a nurse, and in addition to working in a cardiac rehab, taking care of a lot of heart patients, I was also going out to their homes, and I would visit with them and educate them who couldn't get out of their home. And I'm on my way to just turned into the lady's neighborhood, and all of a sudden I hear this popping sound. And as I'm driving down the street, I'm registering a popping sound, but it's like the whole world went to slow motion. And I'm driving down the street, getting ready to go around the corner where she lives. And all of a sudden this SUV is coming at me. And I see these two young boys. One is driving, the other one is sitting in the passenger seat with his arms out the window, with his arms laying across the roof of the SUV, just firing away. I mean, I can't even count as many. The houses were getting shot up, trees were getting shot up. Rochelle, they rolled right by me and never hit me. I could see when they drove by, I was like arm's length from them, and I could see the whites of their eyes. And as they drove by, they never hit me. There was one car behind me as well with the girl. There was a young girl in her car. They didn't hit her. And then the next thing I know, they're leaving that street and turned down another street. Well, her and I pulled into a cul-de-sac trying to get our wits about us. Like she even rolled down her window and she said, "What just happened?" I said, "I think we were just shot at." But it was really weird. We didn't duck. I didn't, I beat myself up sometimes. I wish I would have turned on my phone and, made a copy of it, but I was so busy being in shock of it. So anyway, when we just started pulling out of the cul-de-sac, they came back around and started shooting again. So it was like being a fish in a fishbowl. So as they're going by, once again, they didn't hit either one of us. And so I drove out, and long story short, I made the report with the police officers. I finally got my wits, called 911 and so forth. And then I didn't finish my, I called my office and I said, you know what? I think I can go see my other two patients. They're going, no, you're going home. We'll see your other two patients. So anyway, from that,
so that was that part of, oh, I'm sorry. That was that part of you, though, that always thinks you can keep pushing through.
Exactly. And that's another thing that you all have taught me. I start feeling when I'm starting to get exhausted, and I pull back the reins now and I say, I've had enough for one day. I'm going home. I'm going to put my feet up. I'll come back again tomorrow, type of thing. But the one thing I want to point out, and this is where I knew I had PTSD from this, I was laying in the bed that night watching TV because I couldn't read, I couldn't pray, I couldn't do anything. I just had the TV on. I have no clue what I was watching. And all of a sudden, there's a barrel of a gun facing from the TV at me, and I jumped out of bed and landed in the floor. It was that quick where I wasn't even thinking. And thereafter, whenever I would see something on TV or I have a couple of police officers that are friends, and they have their pistols on the side of and I couldn't even look at their gun. And whenever it would come on TV, a commercial or something, I would calmly, but I would look down, and I could just feel myself getting that fear again. And then I told Lori one day, might have been her second or third phone call. And I said, Lori, guess what? I was watching a television show the other day, and there was a gun pointing right at me through the television, and I just kept looking at it like it was nothing. I didn't even realize I was coming out of that PTSD just by following the tools that you all have given me.
Wow. I love hearing that, Lynn, because that's incredible. So before doing this program, complex PTSD was my clinical specialty, and I did EMDR, and I used to think that if someone had PTSD like that, they had to go back and reprocess the incident to be able to get PTSD symptoms go away. And I have seen women just like you, and just you sharing that is, I think, so encouraging for people to hear that as you regulate your nervous system, you don't have to go in and reprocess every single traumatic incident that you've had. As your nervous system learns to be safe, it can release those past fear reactions. So thank you for sharing that. And I imagine being a nurse, you've probably had a lot of reason to live in high alert in the work that you
Sure.
do.
Yeah. I worked in ICU for about 30 years, and there
Okay.
were some of the patients. I remember one patient kicked me across the room, and I lost my breath, hit me in the solar plexus, landed on the floor, and then he pulled the hair out of another nurse that was coming to my aid. But so things like that happen frequently to nurses that people aren't aware of. So there's a little bit of standoffish, what's going to happen right now, depending on what's rolling in the door at that time. So it does kind of keep you on edge with that
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. And I'm so glad because even though that's not something you have to encounter every day is an image of a gun, to have that activated just in watching TV or seeing a friend, it still says your nervous system is on guard. So I'm so glad to see you've seen that relax. Are you
Yeah.
sleeping better now?
I am 7 to 8 hours every night, except this past week I've had an arthritic knee that's been flaring up. And so that has been keeping me up, but not the PTSD. So
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. What did you find helpful in terms of the support in Joyful and Present? That it was the curriculum that, obviously you have to do the exercises yourself to get results. So I know that you did them because you got the results. So congratulations to you for doing them. We have live calls and replays and coaching support. What did you find helpful after you had your enrollment call with Megan and joined?
I did all of those, and then many times I would start feeling pressure again. That I was only on the first session, maybe module 6 or something like that, and I was going, "Am I going fast enough, or am I going too slow, or how am I doing this?" And I started going, "You know what? I'm doing whatever I need to do to get through whatever I need to get through." So then I started just going through all the modules at my own pace. Sometimes I would even go back, and I have my little book here that you all sent me, and I make notes in the book because if there's one module that really stood out to me, I would write the name of the module down, and then I would keep going with other modules, but I would go back to that module and listen to it again and again and again if I have to. The body scan, I bet you I've heard it at least 50 times because it helps me to meditate on, and then I'll take scripture, of course, and
Yes.
start meditating on the scripture. And I wanted to share one with you. And then the
Yeah.
replays, the call replays, those were phenomenal. I remember Lori, and I remember Angie
Yes.
when they were doing theirs. I don't remember seeing too many other women, but when they were doing it was like 20 minutes of just taking the time. When they were just talking and take us through the breathing and just relaxing. I mean, it got to the point, Rochelle, where I would just hear their voice and I would automatically just start relaxing before they even got
Wow.
started. But I
Oh,
wanted to share something with you. I shared this with Lori several times we got on this. I am so fixated now on Romans 12:1 and 2, and especially in 2, where it says, "Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect." And I thought, I've always loved that scripture, and I've read it for years and years, but I never quite knew how to walk that out. And like I said, I'm 73 years old and never knew quite how to walk that out. But then I started thinking, you know what? You all have given us the tools, a step by step almost, of how to walk out renewing our mind to the things of God and not so much of the world. It doesn't mean we ignore the world, but we certainly pay more attention to God than we do the world. And that helps you sleep too. So,
I love
and
that.
then
That's one of my favorite verses also, and I think is foundational to what we do.
then let me tell you about setting boundaries. I started meditating on I am intentional. There is more for me in life. There is a better way. I started believing that I am worthy of a happy life, a content life, because, and I'm not to go through any particular problems, but I've always grown up thinking I'm expendable, that that everybody else is important except me. I was raised that way, not only by parents, but also by teachers and nursing. My God. But anyway, so I started learning through your program. I started learning that it's not selfish to feel like I'm important. I always thought that was a selfish thing. But it's not selfish to feel like you're important and so are your feelings. And so Psalm 1 verses 2 through 3, I started meditating on this, securing my new conscious competency. Delight in the law of the land of the Lord means remembering his ways and walking in those ways. Then it says meditate on his laws, ways, day and night, means reminding myself of how Jesus walked the earth, not in panic, not in victim mode, which if anybody had a reason to be a victim, it was him, but in confidence and assurance that God has a plan and he will reveal that plan in each situation when it's time to resolve that situation. And last but not least, I'm like a tree planted along the riverbank. My roots are planted deep in the river of life, bearing fruit each season. Sometimes we can see and feel the fruit, but it isn't picking time yet. So I see myself with a problem, and then I see the answer hanging off the tree, for instance, but it's not quite ready to pick yet because God's not ready for me to get involved with that answer to the problem yet. So what do we do in the meantime? We meditate, we sing praise songs, we do the body scan in our own head. We do all of that stuff. And that is just, it's a miraculous program that you have started doing. It's just great.
Lynn, thank you so much for all you've shared. Thank you for trusting us. Thank you for participating. It makes me so happy. And when you said you're 73 years old, I love it. We encounter so many women who just never stop growing through life. And obviously you've poured into other people in your caretaking as a nurse, I'm sure as a family member, in all the ways. And it just makes me so happy to hear you. Truly, to hear you say that you know that you are worthy and that you can rest in the truth of who he says that you are. That makes me so happy. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing that. And it makes me really happy for you, and so happy to hear that you can rest now and maybe find even that it's not only not selfish, but it really doesn't limit. It just gives you your best self to be able to give to others, doesn't it?
Exactly. To keep going, to keep giving. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Well, a pleasure getting to have this conversation with you. Congratulations on, I'll share with all the team ladies, this, because they'll love to hear this and how their gifts have been used.
Yeah, it's a wonderful program, Rochelle.
If you have one thing to say to women who were, listen to you and want help for all the things you mentioned, what would you say to them?
I would say if you're in the program, keep making notes to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even if it's jotting down just a thought or something so that you can remember, because there's so many things in this program that you can peel off and use down the road. And then I wrote here, work the program, work the problem. Don't live in victim mentality, because we're not victims, conquerors.
That's right. Well, thanks for everything, Lynn. It's been great having this conversation.
You're welcome. It's good to meet you, Rochelle.